He had the legs to get himself deep into the Grand Canyon before his damaged heart finally told the truth, and by then the climb back had already turned fatal. It was the 19th of July, 2016. Grand Canyon National Park was under a heat advisory, with inner canyon temperatures forecast above 110 degrees. Daniel Mercer started down the South Kaibab Trail at roughly 7,260 feet, a route that drops hard and fast toward the Colorado River with almost no shade, no water, and about 140 feet of descent by Cedar Ridge alone. Daniel Mercer was 55, lived in Mesa, Arizona, and worked as a senior project manager for a civil engineering contractor that built municipal water systems across Maricopa County. He had been running for more than 20 years. Coworkers described him as the kind of man who signed up early, trained exactly as scheduled, then acted like none of it was a big deal. He had finished 9 full marathons, a long list of halves, and a local 10K almost every spring. His social media pages were full of finish line photos, sunrise runs, split times, bib numbers pinned flat with almost obsessive neatness. He was not a casual athlete. He was a man who trusted his body because that body had carried him through pain, heat, boredom, injury, and recovery for 2 decades. His wife, Linda Mercer, later told investigators that he had talked for years about doing a Grand Canyon hike the right way, meaning early, light, fast, before the tourist crowds. They had driven up from Mesa the afternoon before, checked into a room in Tucson, eaten an early dinner, and set out his gear on the hotel desk before bed. The gear was minimal: trail shoes, running shorts, a light synthetic shirt, a small hydration pack with a 2-liter bladder, 4 electrolyte tablets in a plastic sleeve, 2 energy gels, 1 phone, 1 set of car keys, no trekking poles, no brimmed hat, no cooling towel, no extra shirt, no insulating layer for the rim before sunrise. It was basically the setup of a runner, not a canyon hiker. At 4:26 that morning, Daniel Mercer sent a text to his adult son in Tempe, getting an alpine start. At 4:41, the hotel camera caught him leaving alone through the side entrance. At 4:57, a shuttle driver dropped him at the South Kaibab trailhead. The driver later remembered him because he had asked whether the trail to the river was pretty runnable on the descent. There was something else Daniel Mercer did not mention that morning. 11 months earlier, a cardiologist in Phoenix had documented severe calcific aortic stenosis. His aortic valve had narrowed enough to restrict how much blood his heart could push forward during heavy exertion. The records also noted episodes of exercise-related chest tightness during summer runs, plus a recommendation to avoid extreme heat until surgical follow-up. Daniel Mercer kept the appointment card. He did not keep the follow-up. Linda Mercer told investigators she knew he had once been told he had a murmur. She did not know it had progressed to severe stenosis. 2 friends from his running group later said he never mentioned a heart condition at all. That was not true. The South Kaibab Trail has a reputation that catches exactly this kind of person. It starts with a gift. You lose elevation almost immediately. The switchbacks are sharp, the views are ridiculous. The morning air on the upper trail can feel cool enough to make the whole thing seem manageable. Each step down feels earned before it feels costly. The climb out exists only as arithmetic. That is the moat fact at the center of this trail. The canyon hides the price until the bill comes due on the ascent. By then you are lower, hotter, farther from help, and carrying the exact fatigue you did not feel while descending. Heat in the canyon does not rise in a tidy straight line. It pools, it reflects off rock. It radiates back at you from below. On South Kaibab, there is almost no reliable shade after sunrise, and there is no potable water on the route. A fit person often gets into more danger than an unfit one, because the stronger legs erase the early friction. Distance stops feeling like a warning. It starts feeling like permission. With severe aortic stenosis, that effect gets worse. A narrowed valve can hide in plain sight during ordinary life. The body adapts. A runner learns the sensation of strain, learns what can be pushed through, learns that breathing hard is not the same thing as being in trouble. Then heat strips fluid from the bloodstream. Blood vessels open wide to dump body heat, and the heart has to push harder with less volume returning to it. Output falls, blood pressure drops. The brain gets less oxygen. Sometimes the first unmistakable symptom is collapse. That is pretty much what made Daniel Mercer such a bad match for South Kaibab in July. He was trained enough to get deep. He was stubborn enough to treat early stress as normal. He had a cardiac defect that punished volume loss. The canyon provided the heat, the gradient, and the delay. Daniel Mercer passed U-Ah Point. A retired couple from Henderson, Nevada, Ruth Pritchard, 67, and Dale Pritchard, 69, were stopped there taking photos. Both later gave statements to park investigators. Dale Pritchard said Daniel Mercer had no hat, was already sweating heavily, and offered a quick morning without stopping. Ruth Pritchard said she remembered his breathing because it seemed too loud for that early in the descent. She told investigators it wasn't panic breathing, it was controlled. Daniel Mercer did not appear distressed, he appeared committed. 5 miles from the trailhead, and about 1,140 feet lower, there he took his first known photo, a wide shot facing northeast as sunlight hit the upper walls. The image metadata later placed it at 5 hours 37 minutes and 12 seconds. At Cedar Ridge, another witness noticed him, Monica Reyes, 34, a middle school science teacher from Albuquerque hiking solo before a family rafting trip, later told investigators that Daniel Mercer asked whether she knew the distance to Skeleton Point. She also noticed the hydration tube clipped to his shoulder strap. He took a long pull from it while they spoke, then squeezed the bladder with one hand as if checking how much remained. That detail mattered later. Monica Reyes estimated the entire exchange took less than 20 seconds. The park had already posted warnings at the rim. South Kaibab had its own warning language for good reason. No water, minimal shade, exposed traverses, serious elevation loss early. The park's emergency log shows that rangers had already discussed expected heat illness cases during the morning briefing. Daniel Mercer kept descending. He reached Skeleton Point, roughly 3 miles from the rim where the Colorado River first comes fully into view. This was the place people stop and feel rewarded. The river flashes below. The scale changes. The descent still feels easy enough that the return does not seem like a real event yet. If there was a last clean moment to turn around, this was it. A third witness saw him there. Harold Baines, 61, a retired postal supervisor from St. George, Utah, was resting against the rock wall with his daughter. He took one photo of himself with the river in the background at 6 hours 20 minutes and 48 seconds, then another of the trail below. Harold Baines remembered that because the answer bothered him. It sounded practiced, like a man dismissing a category, not a condition. By 6:52, according to data later recovered from his GPS watch, Daniel Mercer had gone below Skeleton Point. His descent pace remained steady. Heart rate data were incomplete because the watch had lost skin contact intermittently, probably from sweat, but the available record showed repeated spikes into the 160s. For a conditioned 55-year-old runner, that was high for downhill travel in the early morning. 4 miles from the rim, and over 3,200 feet below the trailhead. This was deep enough that the canyon had changed character. Less breeze, more stored heat, more reflected light. The long climb back was no longer theoretical. It was the next thing. The fourth named witness met him there. Kevin Lister, 42, a commercial river guide from Flagstaff, was hiking up from Phantom Ranch after an overnight on the river. He had his pack off. His shirt was dark with sweat from collar to waistband. Kevin Lister asked where he was headed. That was the right decision. It was also the last safe moment that still felt like a victory. At 7:19, Daniel Mercer took the last photo of himself alive. It was later recovered from his phone. In the image, the light is hard and white. He is smiling. The river is not visible, only tan slopes dropping away behind him. His face is flushed. There is salt dried across the front of his shirt. One shoulder strap sits twisted, as if he had thrown the pack back on quickly. His GPS data show him starting uphill. This is the hinge in almost every canyon depth. The ascent begins while the hiker still feels basically fine. That is why the turn seems smart enough. You are going up now. You have made the responsible choice. The problem is that the body has already spent more than it realizes. The return starts on debt. At 7:46, Monica Reyes saw him again below Skeleton Point. This time he was climbing. He had one hand on his thigh during the steeper steps. Monica Reyes offered him an electrolyte tablet from her own kit. He refused it. When Monica Reyes told him, "A while," she said his expression changed. Not panic, more like irritation. The answer did not fit what his legs had promised him earlier. He thanked her, kept moving, then stopped again within sight of her to bend forward with both hands on his knees. By 8:03, the air temperature recorded at Phantom Ranch had already climbed into the 90s. Higher on South Kaibab, direct sun exposure made conditions feel worse. On exposed rock, surface temperatures were much higher. Daniel Mercer had now been in motion for roughly 3 hours, almost all of it without shade. His hydration bladder, later tested, held less than 100 milliliters. Harold Baines saw him a second time just above skeleton point. He was pale around the mouth, flushed through the cheeks, and moving with short, uneven steps. That sentence tells almost the whole story. He knew enough to feel danger. He did not know how close it already was. A viewer comment under the channel's previous episode put that pattern better than most incident reports do. User at milemarker Matt wrote, "Fitness can become permission. Strong people don't avoid mistakes." Daniel Mercer had carried his mistake past the easy turnaround, past the warning signs, past the part where his body still felt like an ally. Kevin Lister, now continuing up from below, spotted Daniel Mercer again on a switchback between Skeleton Point and Cedar Ridge. He was no longer hiking in a straight line. Kevin Lister described a wobble at the hips like someone stepping off a treadmill for the first time. When Kevin Lister caught up and asked if he needed help, Daniel Mercer said, "No chest pain." That answer mattered because it revealed what he was screening for. Daniel Mercer knew enough about his own risk to listen for chest pain. Severe aortic stenosis does not always announce itself that way. In heat, with falling blood pressure and dropping circulating volume, the first obvious failure can be dizziness, confusion, or syncope. Kevin Lister later said he urged him to sit in shade. Daniel Mercer refused again. Kevin Lister watched him continue upward, head down, one hand occasionally brushing the wall for balance. At 8:37, Daniel Mercer's watch recorded the slowest quarter mile of the entire morning. His pace had more than doubled from the climb's early section. His heart rate in the moments where contact resumed jumped above 170. His stride length shortened. The data showed repeated micro-pauses of 3 to 7 seconds. Those were not scenic stops. They were survival edits. A father from Irvine, California, Eric Hahn, 46, was ascending with his wife and 2 teenage daughters after turning around early from Skeleton Point. Eric Hahn told his family to stay put in a patch of shade while he stepped past them to check on him. Eric Hahn said Daniel Mercer's words were slurred on the second sentence. Eric Hahn offered to take his pack for a while. Daniel Mercer shook his head, then missed the next step with his right foot and caught himself on one hand. Eric Hahn said that was the moment he stopped treating it like a tired hiker. He took out his phone to call for help, but the signal was intermittent. He told Daniel Mercer to sit down. He managed perhaps another 20 feet uphill before dropping to one knee. At 8:49, Ruth and Dale Pritchard, descending toward Cedar Ridge on their way back from a short morning hike, reached the same area. Dale Pritchard described his eyes as unfocused. Kevin Lister had rejoined the scene by then. Between them, the 3 witnesses tried to get him into the narrow shade of a rock outcrop just off the trail. Daniel Mercer resisted at first, then seemed to lose the ability to coordinate. Kevin Lister told investigators he heard him say, "Don't let me stop," which was basically the last complete sentence anyone clearly heard from him. He collapsed fully. Witness accounts agreed on the sequence. His hands went down first, then one shoulder. Then he rolled partly onto his right side with his knees bent. Eric Hahn said there was a brief effort to push himself back up, followed by a stare that no longer fixed on any face. Kevin Lister checked for a pulse and found it rapid, weak, then absent or too faint to feel. Ruth Pritchard began timing breaths. She counted 4 in the first 20 seconds, then none she could identify. A partial 911 call connected at 8:55 through Eric Hahn's phone. A second call from Kevin Lister at 8:58 connected long enough to transmit GPS coordinates from his device. Park rangers, a medical team, and helicopter support were dispatched, though the terrain would delay direct extraction. Witnesses attempted cooling as best they could. Monica Reyes, arriving minutes later, provided spare water to wet Daniel Mercer's shirt and neck. Dale Pritchard fanned him with a trail map. Kevin Lister elevated his legs briefly, then stopped when there was no meaningful response. No one at the scene had enough water to do what true aggressive cooling would have required. At 9:07, Ranger Stephanie Cole reached the patient with another ranger and a paramedic. Her report described Daniel Mercer as unresponsive, hot to the touch, with no palpable radial pulse. Agonal respirations absent, skin dry over the arms but soaked through the torso, and significant facial flushing fading to mottling. Cardiac monitoring showed pulseless electrical activity that quickly deteriorated. Resuscitation continued on scene, 7 degrees Fahrenheit. That number was already bad enough. It may also have been lower than his true peak, because lay responders had begun external cooling before the ranger team arrived. Intravenous access was attempted. Airway maneuvers were performed. Chest compressions were initiated. Cold packs were placed at the neck, axilla, and groin. There was no sustained return of spontaneous circulation. 6 miles below Cedar Ridge. The recovery made the timeline even clearer. Investigators documented his body lying partly on the uphill side of the trail in a right lateral position, knees flexed, head angled toward the rock wall where witnesses had tried to pull him into shade. His hydration bladder was empty except for a trace amount of fluid in the tubing. One energy gel remained unopened in the outer mesh pocket. The second gel wrapper was found torn in his shorts pocket, though witness statements suggested he had not consumed it during the ascent. Mel. The last successful screen interaction was at 7:20 when the final selfie was saved. His GPS watch stopped recording movement at 8:53, matching the witness reports of collapse. Salt crust covered the chest of his shirt, both shoulder straps, and the waistband of his shorts. His trail shoes showed heavy 4-foot dust abrasion from descending speed, plus scuff marks on the right toe consistent with stumbling late in the ascent. Park investigators later reconstructed the morning almost minute by minute from that data. The phone images, shuttle records, hotel video, and the statements from Ruth Pritchard, Dale Pritchard, Monica Reyes, Harold Baines, Kevin Lister, and Eric Hahn. The accounts were remarkably consistent. Daniel Mercer started early, moved quickly, turned at the tip-off, climbed until progressive instability became obvious, then collapsed before reaching Cedar Ridge. The autopsy was performed by the Coconino County Medical Examiner the following day. It documented severe calcified aortic stenosis with marked narrowing of the aortic valve, concentric left ventricular hypertrophy, and an enlarged heart. There was no evidence of acute trauma sufficient to cause death. There was no intracranial hemorrhage. The lungs were mildly edematous. Skeletal muscle changes were consistent with exertional stress. The coroner's file also noted recent medical records confirming the prior diagnosis of severe valve disease. Toxicology was negative for alcohol, illicit substances, and prescription sedatives. Caffeine was present within a routine range. There was no evidence of stimulant misuse. His serum chemistries, interpreted with caution because of the post-mortem interval, were consistent with dehydration and heat stress. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death exertional heat stroke complicated by severe undiagnosed to others aortic stenosis and hypertensive heart disease. The manner of death was ruled accident. Daniel Mercer's phone, watch, wedding ring, car keys, and clothing were released to his next of kin. His body was released to a funeral home in Mesa on the 22nd of July. Grand Canyon investigators closed the incident after the witness statements, scene report, and autopsy findings were reconciled. The case was